My name is Dmytro Kozatskyi. I am currently a serviceman of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Before that, I was a soldier with the Azov regiment, and for some time headed Azov's press service. During the full-scale invasion, I was in Mariupol. I documented the lives of civilians during occupation, under constant bombardment, and how members of the armed forces and Azov defended Mariupol. I also took photos there that sort of went viral.
Mariupol is the symbolic center of Ukrainian resistance against the Russian invasion, and the Azovstal steel plant, where Ukrainian military and civilians are holed up by the hundreds, is the site of the last stand there.
Honestly, I didn't expect it to be on such a large scale. For some reason, I thought hostilities would just intensify along the front line we already had before February 2022. But I didn't expect such brutal actions from the Russians, involving missiles, aviation, and such offensives.
Dmytro Kozatskyi, whose call sign is Orest, is a soldier and photographer who went to the Azovstal steel plant to bring their story to the world in the early days of the Russian full-scale invasion. He was held in Russian captivity for 4 months. It is only with your support that the Kyiv Independent can bring to you exclusive interviews, such as this one with Kozatskyi. The majority of our funding comes from our members, like you, which means that even a few dollars and liking this video can help make a difference.
The bombardment was constant back then. There were rarely moments of conditional ceasefire, for instance, when evacuations of civilians were carried out. In those days, bombardment was ordinary. We shouldn't call bombardment ordinary, but unfortunately, you get used to it. These men had their limbs amputated. When I came to the hospital, I saw that there were a lot of guys with amputated limbs. In any case, even if it had been just one person, it would have still been extremely unfortunate, because I know how these amputations were performed. There was very little medicine. There were very little or at times no anesthetics at all. So these amputations were performed on guys without anesthesia. And that's why every wound brought a lot of pain for a long time, because there were no painkillers. The doctors simply couldn't give them because there were none. I don't remember when I took this photo. It was in May. I took them all in May. I didn't really get to know people when I came and took the pictures of them, which would be a good journalistic thing to do, but these were different times. So I just asked the guys if I could take their picture, and I did. I had a lot of other work, such as holding live streams or communicating with journalists. That's why it didn't even occur to me to use my camera to take pictures. I was running around with an iPhone, and I used it to film interviews with civilians. And that's why all of it was preserved, because it was synchronized with iCloud, and everything was uploaded there. There were no problems with charging the camera, because I almost never used it. And probably, once I charged it once, it could have lasted the whole time, since, I wasn't taking so many photos. The advantage of the small camera was that it was always with me, next to my bed or in a bag, and so it was hidden. And it survived to the last day. Unfortunately, I only have one small camera left, my Sony Alpha 6300, and one 30mm Sigma 1.4 lens. So actually, these photos are terrible, but beautiful, because at least they're blurred in bokeh. God, a very cynical joke for any photographers out there. On April 15th, an aerial bomb hit our bunker, and the room where these cameras were stored was completely destroyed. Many comrades and my good friend died there. Everything around me was covered in dust. During heavy bombardment, when something hit nearby, the dust often rose. So I thought that something nearby was hit again. But it turned out that it actually hit us. I realized that I was on the floor among ruins, and I felt blood running down my head. These memories are pretty chaotic. I remember I woke up, stood up, and realized what was happening. And I saw my brother in arms, who at that moment was still alive. They tried to save him, but unfortunately, he died. All my photos, including this one, were taken in one bunker that we called the Source. Because it was a very large room, it was quite cold there. So the service members who lived there lit small fires to warm themselves near them, to dry some laundry, and cook food. If you look at this photo, you can see that it's quite warm. I didn't do any color correction or set up any lighting for it. When we were somewhere in this place, as you can see, it was dark, and the only light was from this fire. It's now quite symbolic for me that this photo is as warm as my attitude towards Nava, because I love her very much, and I appreciate our friendship that continues, despite everything. She actually helped me take these photos. She followed me along in this very bunker. Then we were passing this spot, and I offered to take a photo of her. You probably know her story, because it is also quite tragic. She married her partner on the anniversary of the creation of the Azov regiment. I remember that I even took their wedding photographs in the bunker. And unfortunately, a few days later, her partner was killed by the Russians. And then we had to film an interview about it. Why did we have to? Because of course, no one wants to talk about it at the time of a tragedy. But we understood the importance of covering this story. We understood that this story could prompt people to action. That's why she decided to do it.
І ми одне одному це обіцяли. Я йому обіцяла вибратися, він мені обіцяв вижити. Але по факту зараз від цього місця, від цього пекельного місця, де дуже мучаться наші захисники, поранені захисники, де вони гинуть, його душа принаймні звідси вибралась.
We occasionally went out to the civilians or for other reasons, and it lightened the anxiety we felt in the basement. Because you sit in the dark all the time, you don't see much of what's happening above. You only get news from those who kept the defenses above. I didn't name it, but people called it "The Light Will Win," so I continue to call it that. When we were in this bunker, I saw a light shining through, and I thought it would make a good photo. There was one sunny day, and the light was coming through this hole. And since there was always dust in these bunkers, it rose when someone passed by. This is a self-portrait. I was walking alone from one bunker to another, and I had a camera with me. And since I remembered this ray of light that I saw earlier, I decided to capture it with me in the shot. Many believe that it is some kind of graphic, that it is something photoshopped. In fact, there are no graphics here at all, only minimal color correction. This is how it really looked like in real life. When I took it, I didn't post it right away. It stayed with me for a few days because I was waiting for a special occasion. Because for me, this photo is quite symbolic. I posted it on the day when we got the news that there would be an evacuation of military personnel to save lives. That's what they called it back then. I understood it meant we would end up in captivity. But for me, at that moment, that was good news because the enemy was getting closer and closer. They were already on the territory of Azovstal. That's why I posted it on such a symbolic day when we received some good news. At that moment, it seemed good. Now, in light of all that happened, I understand that it wasn't the case. But it seemed that way then. Many attribute all kinds of things to me, like some kind of heroism. And to be honest, I really don't like it, because this was just my job. I'm proud of taking these photos, because they made an impact. Because, thanks to these photos, and the work of many people, I'm now free to give this interview, and many cannot do this. I will not single out the most valuable one. Most would probably say that this photo because it is very popular and it's gone viral. But popularity does not equal value. I'm glad that these photos are used to draw attention to the prisoners of war, to draw attention to the courage of the defenders of Azovstal and Mariupol. However, for me, these are not some photos that evoke warm, pleasant memories. This is more about pain. It was not some kind of pre-planned project to show something, to promote some message. Back then, so many people in the world, and almost everyone in Ukraine, knew what was happening in Mariupol, what was happening in Azovstal. And there was no need to convince people of what was happening there. I just wanted to show the life that went on in these bunkers. We didn't realize that these photos that we took in one day would make such an impact. Because we understood that both civilians and the defenders of Mariupol died there literally every day. And in general, extremely terrible things were happening. Like, do people need any more confirmation of all this? As it turned out, yes. And the photos became a certain visual symbol. I'm glad that there are photos that represent the people who sacrificed their lives, or who were wounded, or those who survived but are still in captivity. Many people stood up and defended me and died, but I'm still alive. I'm glad that my photos can be useful to some extent now, but I don't want to put the emphasis on myself for taking them. They were possible thanks to all those who maintained the defense, because thanks to them, Mariupol stood for so long. Thanks to them, I could do it. And this is teamwork. I know that these photos are mine and that I took them, but I want them to be perceived as the joint work of all defenders of Mariupol.